When I lived in Canada, my brother and we went for a drive just after winter time. It was during winter time, but the roads weren't icy. But what that meant is that there was a bunch of sand on the road because to make the traction better on icy roads, there'd be sand trucks that just dump sand. And so it's very important to drive with windshield wiper fluid. You can't just put water in. You have to have this special windshield wiper fluid with antifreeze in it so that the windshield wiper fluid doesn't just freeze to your windscreen. We were in a bit of a problem because my brother didn't check the windshield wiper fluid before we left, and we were just going for 40 minutes, but it was just horrible. It was slush. Think about as dirty as like four-wheel driving in mud. That's what it was like driving, and the windshield wipers weren't going to do anything because everything was frozen, and slowly but surely our vision was just getting smaller and smaller, and we could only see through this little. I thought I was going to crash, not me. He was going to crash, and that we were going to die because he was driving like this, trying to look through that little clear speck. Have you ever experienced this in your cars? Even if you're on a long trip here in Australia and your windshield, like driving from here to here, it sounds like it's raining, but it's just bugs like smashing into your windscreen, and you need to have that fluid. It is very important to be able to see when you're driving, isn't it? It's important to know where you're going. In church, in anything, it's important to know where we're going. And so today, I want to talk to you. This is like a really loose segue into our vision. I want to talk to you about the vision of the Rock Christian family. Some of you have been a part of the Rock for a while now, and you would have heard some of the content that I'm going to share today. Some of you, this is going to be brand new. What camp you're in, I want to encourage you to lean in, because if you've been to the Rock for a while, I'm going to throw a curveball at you sort of halfway through, and so there's going to be some new information and a challenge for you. If this is your first time to the Rock and you're visiting, or you're trying to figure out, is this the church for you? There is no better that you could have attended than today, because we're going to pull back the curtains a little bit and tell you why we do the things that we do. Are we ready? All right. I want to start with this statement, okay? This statement. You have the power to change the trajectory of someone's entire life through a single invitation or a series of invitations. I'll read that again. You have the power to change the trajectory of someone's entire life. This isn't hyperbole. This is true. Through a single invitation or a series of invitations. Have you ever been invited by someone to somewhere and just kept saying, no, I don't want to come, but they were just so persistent, and eventually you said yes, and you're just so glad that you did? I mean, there have been invitations in your life that have changed your life. In fact, you are here because of an invitation, right? Your dad maybe invited your mom on a date, and then the rest was history. Or maybe vice versa, your mom invited your dad on a date, and then the rest is history. We all are on planet Earth because of an invitation. We've all been invited into something somewhere. When I was 12 years ago, I was just starting dating my wife now, Fiona. And have you ever been afraid to invite someone somewhere because you weren't sure what you were going to get? Like maybe it was to church and you're like, I don't know what is going to happen at this particular service. And then you invite them and you're feeling a little bit anxious because you just don't know what to expect. So my wife, Fiona, and my sister-in-law is here, and so I'm going to be very respectful here. She invited me to go to a family Christmas down at Broom's Head. Not only did she invite me, her family paid for me to go down to Broom's Head. And so, of course, I said yes, right? Dating for 3 months up until this point. And literally, like 50 family members were at Broom's Head. Like all the extended family of her dad's side, they're all at Broom's Head. And little did I know that it was a family ritual, or maybe this was the first one, to film like a music video on vacation, dancing to Gangnam Style and some other things. And of course, I want to impress. I dressed to impress. I was very new, and so I just went along with it. But I love the family to bits, and we still do those videos quite often. But sometimes you just don't know what you're going to get when you invite someone somewhere. Maybe you are afraid to invite a girlfriend or boyfriend over to family dinner because you don't know what your family dinner is going to be. You're like, I'm going to put that thing off as long as I can. And unfortunately, sometimes this does happen in church, right? There was one time I went to church, and I loved the church. I loved the people. It was very warm, and everyone seemed that they were really into what they were doing. But I could tell, and this isn't me being critical because I've been in this boat as well, but I could just tell that they weren't expecting a guest to show up. It was very, we know who's going to come, and so we don't really need to put much effort into if a guest will come, because that may just not happen very often. Again, I'm critical, it was just reality. And so the service was being, and sort of as the service was happening, like, oh, hey, you're a drummer, come jump on drums. You can read, come read the scripture. And it wasn't starting on time. And I felt, as a churched person, that they weren't expecting me and that my time wasn't being valued. Not because my time is more important than anybody else's, but I was just thinking, would I feel comfortable inviting someone that has never come to church into this sort of environment? And that sort of leads me to what we try to do as a church. And I want to just give you a backstory of a specific verse that we try to base everything off as the Rock Christian family. So what has happened is Jesus, it's post-resurrection. We're in the book of Acts. And Luke is the author of Acts. And he thoroughly investigated everything. And he is the writer of Acts. And Jesus was in his ministry, his 3 years of ministry on earth. Jesus came into a very structured time, right? They had been doing the same thing for a very long time. The Mosaic law, there are 613 laws that people had to live by. You had to be Jewish in order to be accepted by God. And this is the environment that Jesus came into. And Jesus came to introduce something brand new. But if you'd been doing the same thing for your whole life, and your ancestors had done the whole same thing, someone comes in and tries to change that, that's a really difficult pill to swallow, isn't it? If you've been used to doing one way for your whole life, for generations, and then someone comes and says, this is the new way to do things, that's a really hard thing to do. And so when Jesus was no longer on earth, there was a group of people that said, everything is going back to the way it was before Jesus. Right? If Gentiles, which are people that are not Jewish, if Gentiles want to be followers of God, they have to become Jewish first. They have to become Jewish first, which means they have to be circumcised, right? Men, if you're going to a church, just put yourself in this boat and you're not circumcised, you're waiting in the car, right? You're like, no, honey, I'm not going in there. Anyhow. Different day, different time. So they had to be circumcised. They had to follow these 613 laws. Now, I'm not just saying follow, they had to live them. They had to breathe them. They had to memorize them. They had to know it like the back of their hand. There were many things that one had to do, many rituals, many practices, many traditions that one had to do in order to become Jewish, in order to be followers of God. And so there's a group of people that would say this: nothing has changed. We are staying the same. Gentiles still have to become Jewish. They still have to be circumcised. They still have to go to college and know these laws, and nothing has changed. But then there's another group of people who are saying, no, Jesus came and he introduced something brand new. And Paul and Barnabas, they were the leaders of this movement because they were on an evangelical tour. They were going down to cities and they were seeing the Spirit of God fall on Gentiles before they were circumcised, before they were Jewish. The Spirit of God was falling on Gentiles. And this is something that was totally new. This is something that had never happened before. And so they're pretty stoked about it, but there are people that were a bit confused, hey, Don't these people have to become Jewish first? And Paul and Barnabas are like, hey, we saw this with our own eyes, but just to settle the score for clarity's sakes, we're going to go back to Jerusalem and have a church council meeting, and we'll figure out, like, hey, what's the go here? Is this new, or does people still have to become Jewish? Because what we're seeing is Gentiles, before they become Jewish, the Spirit of God is fallen. They're being accepted by God. And so they come into this, Paul and Barnabas get to Jerusalem, and there's two camps. There's the nothing has changed camp, and this is brand new. Are you with me? So I'm just going to stand over here for the nothing has changed group, and I'm going to walk over here for the this is brand new. And so there's some pretty big names in this meeting, okay? Peter, you remember Peter? He's the guy that denied Jesus 3 times, and he's the guy that Jesus said, it is on your name that I'll build my church, my ecclesia upon. So Peter was there. James, the brother of Jesus, was there. Paul was there. I mean, there was a lot of big names. There were some Pharisees. And Peter pipes up. And because they're going back and forth, like nothing has changed. Wait, no, this is brand new. There was some conflict in a church meeting. Never, ever will there be conflict in a church meeting. But there was some conflict in a church meeting. And Peter pipes up. And this is what Peter says. I love this. So then, why do you try to test God by putting on the necks of Gentiles a yoke that neither we nor our ancestors have been able to bear? Let me translate that for you. We can hardly do what Jewish people are meant to do. Why are we going to make Gentiles do what we are unable to do? Right? Why would our ancestors have grown up with this? From birth, I mean, this is the framework of our life, and we struggle with this. Why then are we going to ask Gentiles who don't have that history, who don't have that framework to do it? I mean, we live this, we breathe this, and we find it hard to do. We're going to expect Gentiles to do it? And so James, they needed a mediator. They need someone to make a final decision, to speak on behalf of everyone and move this thing forward. And James pipes up, and this is what James says. He says, "It is my judgment, therefore, that we should not make it difficult for the Gentiles who are turning to God." It is my judgment, therefore, that we should not put any unnecessary obstacles in place for the Gentiles who are turning to God. It is my judgment, therefore, that we should make it as easy as possible for unchurched people to turn to God. We should remove any unnecessary obstacle that an unchurched person might face in terms of turning to God. And so at the Rock Christian Family, people will have like their life verse or their vision verse. This is what we try to filter everything through. It is my judgment, therefore, that we should not make it difficult for the Gentiles who are turning to God. And so what does that mean for us? Well, it means that every single week at church on a Sunday, we're going to assume that there are guests in the room. I believe that the gospel message, the message of Jesus, is an irresistible message, that following Jesus makes your life better and makes you better at life. And I don't want to assume that we are all just our little club of church people in here and that we aren't bold enough or confident enough to invite unchurched people to come in. And so our language is going to be very inclusive of church people and unchurched people. We call it double barrel preaching, speaking to two audiences at once. Because there is language that we use as Christians that A, we might not know what it means, and B, unchurched people definitely don't know what it means. And every year I do this, and I'm just going to do it again just so I can help you understand what I mean. So I played football. I was a quarterback playing football. And there was language that if you played football, you would understand. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a play, and you tell me what I would expect you to do. Okay? So, I left Z motion 4P7 drag on 2. Anybody? No. Unfortunately, in church, we often use language that is so exclusive to other people that people will come and just feel so isolated because they're like, What in the world is that guy talking about up there? And so we want to use language that is inclusive to church people and unchurched people. We want, no matter who you are and what you believe, to be able to come away from a Sunday experience something that you can apply to your life. It's why you'll hear me say things like, hey, if you're not a Jesus follower, this is totally optional for you, because you haven't submitted your life to the lordship of Christ. But if you do want to apply it to your life, it will make your life better, and it will make you better at life. But if you are a Jesus follower, this is something that is not optional. Jesus commanded us to do it. I hope you've heard me say that a few times preaching, because I want to talk to two audiences at once. And I don't want to expect that we all come under the same banner. I want to assume that there are guests in the room. We want to be a church that does not make it difficult for those who don't know who God is. We make it difficult for those who are wanting to turn to God. We are going to engage the next generation. And we're going to be okay if the music is a little bit loud to our liking in here on a Sunday. We're going to be okay if the content might not speak directly to me every single Sunday. We're okay if the pastor wears a t-shirt. I'm just kidding. You don't have to be okay with that. I'm just going to keep doing it anyways, if that's okay. But there is one thing that we are okay with getting in the way of people that are turning to God. There is one question that we all have to answer at one point in our life. And that question, who is Jesus? At the end of the day, that is the question that matters. That is the question that matters most for all of us to answer in our life, is who is Jesus? That is the one obstacle that I am okay with having in place, because we all have to answer that. It's a question that we all need to answer at some point in our life. So, in a phrase, what is the vision of the Rock Christian family? We are a church that even unchurched people love to engage with. My statement on how frightening it can be to invite people to something that you don't know what you're going to get. And that can be true in church. But doesn't it put your mind at ease knowing that we are planning a service with that person in mind? Doesn't it sort of put your mind at ease that you can be confident inviting somebody that hasn't been to church before, and they're going to have something that's applicable come away from a Sunday experience? I know for me, that puts my mind ease. We're designing a Sunday experience with that person in mind. Now, I don't want you to confuse this. We are not creating a church just for unchurched people. We are creating a church that you would feel comfortable at inviting people that haven't been to church to. We want to go deep and we want to go wide. We want to go deep in our faith, and we want to spread the news of Jesus wide. Now, this vision, this isn't a me thing. This isn't a me thing. Because if it's a me thing, it's not going to work. This is a we thing. This is an everybody thing. And if you're a Jesus follower or a believer, here is our challenge, whether we like it or not. God has given us the responsibility. We actually have a responsibility. We are the stewards of the church of our generation and the next generation. We are the stewards. We are to look after the church. And I don't believe that we should just maintain the church. We should be multipliers. And you know at stake? These amazing young people. What I've been really challenged in is, and if you are a believer, if you're a follower of Jesus, your salvation is written in stone. Shouldn't we do everything in our power to introduce the next generation to the God who loves them, so that they grow up with a faith that is their own, that when they turn 18, they're not just going to leave their faith? That shouldn't we be doing everything we can to steward the church for our generation and for the future generation, because that's what matters. We're responsible for the generation now and the next one. And I'm asking, will you engage with us in a significant way with your time and with your money, so that we can maximize our potential in the community and maximize our influence in the church? This is This is so important. Not a me thing. It's a we. And most Christians are content to consume, to take what they need and show up when it's convenient to them. We have a value here at the Rock family that we are contributors, we are not consumers. That the church doesn't exist for us, that we are the church and we exist for the world. Most Christians are content to consume and take what they need and show up when it's convenient. They will give only when the preacher pushes them really hard to. And I just say, if this is your first, we do not talk about me a lot at the front of the church. So this is like the one time that we have. But a lot of people are consumers. They believe, but not to the point of following. So here's the challenge. Don't be most Christians. You're better than that. You know better than that. Let's be better than that. Everywhere you look, people assure you that the church in Australia is dying, or that we're on the brink of becoming extinct, or we're going to become like the church in Europe and Canada. And European and Canadian pastors would tell you, don't let that happen. Fight for what you have. Show up for it. Here's a little insight, church people, Christians, lean in. It's really hard to expect unchurched people to come when we do not come. It's very hard to expect unchurched people to come to church on a Sunday if we are not willing to commit to come to church on a Sunday. Let's not let that happen. Let's not let the church die in Townsville. Let's multiply the church in Townsville. We are not a ginormous church, but we have such a long reach with the impact that you have in your community. And church, I will just say, I know I'm being very straightforward to you, but you are amazing. I mean, you are amazing at welcoming people to come to church. You are amazing at being the salt and the light of this world in our community. You are amazing at being an image bearer of us. Let's continue to show up for this vision. Once again, once it starts to die, it's very hard to get it back. And remember, you are the church. You are the church. As an individual, you are the church. You are our church. You are your church. As you go, the church goes. And guys, church, I know you're busy. But we are building this church with busy people. We're building this church with people that don't have time. People who make time. People that have full-time jobs and are still putting work in on top of that through the week to make sure that the next generation is being introduced to the God that loves them, to make sure that this that can happen on a Sunday happens, to make sure that their opportunity can be through the week. There are people that don't have time but make time because they believe when Jesus says, go into the world and make disciples. Go into the world, that they want to commit their lives to that. And so what I want to say is perhaps it's time for you to make time and to do this for the next generation, to do for the next generation what somebody has done for you or what you wish somebody had done for you. Church, it's time to commit. It's time to commit to a plan how you will support your church financially, how you'll support the church with your time. And to those that have been carrying the weight, and I just want to say a huge thank you to the group of people that serve week in and week out, who faithfully give week in and week out, because without them, this thing could not happen. So I just want to say a huge, huge thank you for carrying the load for as long as you have been. Thank you. And to those of you that we show up and we get what we can and then we head to the car, we owe that group of people that have been serving and faithfully giving a huge debt of gratitude. Most importantly, you owe it to yourself and your kids to join them and to ensure that our church, that your church, remains on mission and remains on message. This is your opportunity to do for others what others have been doing for you and will continue to do for you, whether you return the favor or not. We will always be here for you because we're committed to being the hands and the feet of Jesus to the people in this community. The church is God's agent of transformation, personally, culturally, and globally. He used it to transform my life, and I'm sure he used it to transform many of your lives as well. And if you've benefited from it, perhaps it's time for you to give back to it. The church is God's agent of transformation for the world. The church is your opportunity to take part in transformation. And church, I don't want you to miss that opportunity. I don't want you to miss that opportunity. I don't want you to miss the life that it brings as you serve other people. We are called to serve. We are called to be servants. Let's not miss that opportunity. Now, disclaimer, if you are here for the first time, or you still are sort of exploring, hey, is this church thing for me? There is no pressure on you. I am not really speaking to you right now. If you've been attending The Rock for a while now, and if you were to be honest, you would consider yourself a consumer. And it's sort of, what can I get out of it? What can I get out of it? And it's time for you to go from being a consumer to a contributor. How can you contribute to the kingdom of God? How can you contribute to the life of this church? How can you contribute to the next generation? We want to be a church that unchurched people would love to engage with. But guys, we can't do it alone. We can't continue to do it with the amount of volunteers that we have. Because what's going to happen is they're all going to burn out, and then we're not going to have a Kids Rock ministry anymore. We're not going to have a transit. We're not going to have people that are greeting you at the back. We're not going to have a music team. We're not going to have a sound team because it's going to become too much. And so I want to say a huge thank you. Can we give those that do serve a huge round of applause? And I know so many of you fall into that boat, but if you don't, and you've been wondering when's the best time, today is the day. Today is the day to become a contributor to what is happening at the Rock Christian Family. And there is a really easy way that you can do that. The easiest way that you can do that is you can go to the back after the service. There are sign-up sheets for different teams that you can be a part of, and somebody from that team will contact you through the week and catch up with you and thank you and tell you how you can get involved. Church, I love you guys. I love this ministry. I love that God has called us to steward it. And there are hundreds of thousands of people in this community that don't know the love of Christ. And I want to do everything in my power. I want to do everything in our power to create an environment that those people can be introduced to the God that loves them. So will you join us in this? Will you join us? Will you be contributors? Can we continue to multiply what God has called us to? We don't want to just maintain it. I want to continue to see seats being filled, because what that means is that people's lives are being transformed and people's lives are being changed. Not even God can change the life of an empty seat. Not even God can change the life of an empty seat. So let's continue to invite and continue to be the hands and feet. You are the church. As you go, the church goes. Amen? Amen.